This is really the whole genesis of the course, was to really think about how can you use generative AI tools to build understanding of things that you can do creatively with the ethics of creating content sort of as the undercurrent of that.
Hello there, and welcome to today's episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. My name is Monica Burns, and I am so glad that you're here to join me today. If you want to make the most of education technology, aka EdTech, well, you are in the right place. My goal has always been to help make EdTech easier and give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. Every Tuesday here on the Easy EdTech Podcast, you'll hear stories from my time in the classroom, the work I do now with schools and districts, and my travels to different EdTech events. Get ready for solo episodes where I share some quick tips and stories, and interviews full of practical ideas and stories from new guests each month. If we mention something you'd like to check out, make sure to click the link. You'll find it in the episode description or the summary area where you're listening to this podcast, or you can find every episode and all of the resources we mention by going to classtechtips.com/podcast, or by going to classtechtips.com and just clicking on the Easy EdTech Podcast button at the top of the page. This episode is sponsored by my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction, published by ASCD and ISTE. It's full of quick tips educators can use, and Amazon almost always has it on sale. Just search for me, Monica Burns, on Amazon to see all of my books and quick reference guides. But please remember that there are 2 authors named Monica Burns on Amazon, and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to tell the difference between our books. Just head to Amazon, search Monica Burns, and you'll find my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction. This week's episode is titled Creativity and Ethics in the Age of AI with Eric Walters. Earlier this year, I reached out to members of my Easy EdTech Club to see if anyone had a great story to tell and wanted to join me for an episode of the podcast. When I heard from Eric about the course he's leading for students in New York City, I knew he would make a great guest for the podcast. A side note, if you're a member of the Easy EdTech Club and were a little hesitant to share your story, I hope that listening to this awesome conversation with Eric will inspire you to reach out to me and let me know what you're working on. Well, in today's episode, you're going to hear Eric mention the asynchronous course his students are a part of, and he's hoping to have an online version for teachers from anywhere in the world to check out. So make sure to check out the show notes for today's episode. It's going to have all the resources and updated links when things start to go live. Welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to chat with you about creativity and ethics in the age of AI. But before we get into all of that together, can you share a bit with listeners, what is your role in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
So first of all, thank you for having me. My name is Eric Walters. I'm Director of STEM Education at Marymount, New York. We're a nursery through 12 all-girls school in Manhattan. Boy, my day-to-day, there are no 2 days that are the same. I'm either in the classroom, I teach physics, atmospheric science, and some tech electives, but I also oversee our entire K through 12 creative technology department. So that gives me the opportunity to work with 5 other really talented educators that are both creative and innovative and really think about how to work with students in bringing their ideas to life, whether it's a kindergarten student, a second grader, a fifth grader, an eighth grader, or a senior. So it's just like every day is just sort of filled with a lot of brainstorming, but also a lot of implementation when it comes to new ideas. I couldn't ask for anything better.
And I love that combination of things that you described, that are happening and that you're getting to see, right, happen throughout the school week. And so today we're talking about creativity and ethics. And I want to ask you about your course. You have a course, and I wanted to kind of learn a little bit about what it looks like, maybe behind the scenes, this elective that you've developed on creativity and AI. Can you share a bit about the creation, what inspired the creation of this elective for your students?
So it's sort of twofold. One thing about Marymount is we're part of the RSHM, Religious of the Sacred Heart of Mary, global network of schools. And part of my day-to-day experience is building educational opportunities for our network of schools. So we designed a program called RSHM Global, which allows students at any of the Marymounts across the globe, there are 22 schools in 9 countries, to take courses with their peers at other schools. So originally we had offered global entrepreneurship, which still continues to be very popular. Then a year ago, we decided to offer creativity and AI. And we had about 40 students from our network of schools take it. And then we decided to bring that course separately into our school here because there was a lot of interest in AI, but we didn't want it just to be how to use ChatGPT,
Right.
how to prompt correctly. So we decided to do it, and this is really the whole genesis of the course, was to really think about how can you use generative AI tools to build understanding of things that you can do creatively with the ethics of creating content sort of as the undercurrent of that. So the course we offer at Marymount is asynchronous. And there are 4 separate modules, and at Marymount, we have 20 students in our school from grades 10, 11, and 12 taking it. They're just about to get to their final project now. So, but the modules run about 2 weeks, and there's a deliverable at the end of those 2 weeks. And what I find really impressive is that and I know you've probably taught asynchronous courses that if you get 50% of the participants turning something in, that's great. This course, every student has turned in every assignment on time. And I'm like, that's really good. That makes me happy. And the work they do is really good too. So I think it's sort of naturally fit between like an asynchronous model and the creativity and AI aspect that I don't have to be standing in front of them to help them explore generative AI. They can do it on their own. Some of them are already doing it on their own.
And I'm so glad that you pointed out, Eric, that piece about the asynchronous component, because I do think when anyone, right, in education is considering an asynchronous course, right, or developing that for a group, high school students, right, perhaps like your group, there is that pause to say, like, what is participation going to look like? What does it mean for everyone to get through, right, a 2-week section and have a deliverable at the end? What are those expectations? And so, what does a typical lesson or project look like in the creativity and AI course?
So if I go through the 3 modules that we've done so far, the first one was just exploring tools. I gave them Runway, Midjourney, a couple of other ones. And I said, just explore them. I don't want you to do anything. Share with me what you got. And that gave them a foundation of what the limitations were, but also what the possibilities were, generative AI. The second lesson that they did focused specifically on creating some content that was meaningful to them. So they had to identify a tool that they were going to use, and then they had to create something that was related specifically to something that they were doing in one of their other classes. And that build agency. And again, thinking about what the possibilities were, but also connecting it to something that they were already doing. One of the things that students often struggle with, and I can tell you as an adult learner, I struggle with this as well. If you say to me, like at a workshop or something, like come up with a project to do, I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do. And kids are the same way. And so I've been trying to give them very specific, tangible things to do that, again, connect with what they're already doing. The third week, we focus specifically on ethics. And the Pomfret School makes these cards that are called Cards Against Academy. And each one of those cards has a AI challenge on them. So what I did was I assigned each student one of the cards and asked them to give their feedback, like, how would you deal with this issue? And then this was in an online discussion forum. I then asked, they had to respond to one of their peers. I didn't want it to be one of those large, like, free-for-alls, because students just write, I agree.
Right.
But I said, like, let's have this a little bit more structured. So that they finished right before our spring break, which started the middle of March. And now they're working on their final project. They have one of two options. ISTE has an AI student challenge where they have to use generative AI to create a digital product that talks about the positive aspects of generative AI. So I have 5 students doing that. That has an earlier deadline. The students who opted not to participate in the project through ISTE, that's still their final project. Yeah. And it's just due a little bit later. So again, I'm a big fan of my students creating things that are meaningful, and I'm a big fan of them creating things that end up in the public sphere. And that comes from Alan November, who said that years ago, like, your students should be blogging, they shouldn't just be writing stuff. And his book, like, Who Owns the Learning, that's my Bible, because I always go back to that. When I'm thinking about a student project, my thought is like, how can the work that they're doing be made public? So what we'll do is we'll take all of their projects and then put them together into, I'm not sure how, because it's going to depend on what they do for a project, but put them together for at least at the minimum our school community. And if we can find a way to, share it with the larger community, we'll definitely do that as well. So their proposals are due tomorrow. I will give them feedback on their proposals, and then they have about 2 weeks to do their final projects. And I've gotten a couple of proposals so far that are really, really interesting. So
I bet there's just a range of interest, right, from your students, particularly if they're participating. And that's one of the great things about an elective course, is that they're participating with different grade levels, different content they're learning right now, right? They're bringing in a variety of experiences into an elective environment, which I think is one of the wonderful things about being in a secondary or high school space and having that opportunity as a student to kind of get a preview or to look back, right, at what their experience has been as they're collaborating with their classmates, and just to also have a wider scope of what's possible. I mean, I'm sure you have stories. I can think back to my time as a high school student, as a sophomore, taking a class with seniors as an art elective, and it just opened up my world to what was possible within that particular domain, because those kids were a little bit ahead of me in terms of their high school experience.
And interestingly, like, I have a class roster. Now, Marymount's, we're small-ish. We're not that small, but we're not that big either. I couldn't tell you what class any of these kids are in. I never asked them. They know, but I don't. One student was so excited about doing this project, and she really wanted to do it for ISTE. ISTE requires you to, you can't just do it yourself. There has to be like a little team. She recruited someone else that's not in the class and said, can you do this project with me? She came to me, she said, is that okay? And I was like, listen, she wants to do the project with you. I'm all for it.
Yeah.
And, they do good work. And I just think when they know their work is going to be public, they do good work already. But when they know it's going to be public, it like really raises the game for them. And it validates the work that they do. Not to brag, but they presented at ISTE. They presented at International Coalition of Girls Schools. And I think giving them that experience is like, that's what really education is really about. It's not, to me, it's not whether you can just take a test and get 100. It's like, what kind of content are you actually producing?
And I think that's what sticks for so many students too, not just the memory piece, right, of having a memorable experience. That's part of it too, but just the retention, right, and the ability to apply in a variety of contexts that feel really meaningful for them. And so you mentioned, Eric, a bit about those, and I love it. Took me a second, but I love that idea of the codes against academy cards, like just the phrasing of that. So I love that as a vehicle for sparking conversations with students about thinking critically on the ethics of AI. And you mentioned a couple different generative AI tools that your students are exploring right now. What kinds of, for those who might not have heard, say, of a Midjourney, like you mentioned, what kinds of generative AI tools are your students exploring in this elective?
Again, they have sort of voice and choice on what they can do. There's sort of two camps that they sort of end up in, either text to image or text to video, one of those. The previous iteration of this course found itself in my videography course. And what the students in that course were asked to do was they were asked to use generative AI to produce a short film. And that is not easy because of a whole bunch of continuity things. So what they work on is thinking about what kind of story can you tell with generative AI? So thinking about, if I want to tell a certain story, like, for example, like my daily experience at school, can I use text to AI to sort of create that narrative? Or can I use text to video to create that narrative? And the thing I like about it is that students often struggle with anytime they have to create content, especially videos, because they are such perfectionists.
Yeah.
And what this allows them to do is create a narrative that's meaningful to them, but worry less about the content creation and more about the story that they're telling. And to me, that's the most important thing. I'm the same way. If you ask me to do, could you do a video introducing yourself? I'll do like 50 takes of it. But for this class, because it's asynchronous, every week or every module, they get a little introductory video. I use AI to do that. I don't do it myself. So again, places where I can sort of plant seeds for the students about thinking about ways that you can use this effectively as a tool for learning, I think is the other important lesson that I really want them to walk away with.
And I think for someone who might not be sure, for a student who might not be sure what direction to go in, having those teacher-created examples, right, interacting potentially as a consumer, right, of that content first, can help them make some choices, help get their wheels spinning about what would be the great fit, a great fit or the right fit for their project. And, if there's someone listening today who wants to introduce AI topics like the ones in your creativity and ethics course, or perhaps they're struggling to introduce AI with the ethical component to a group of students, where would be a good place for them to start?
I always say start small. Your school may or may not have an AI policy, and I think each school has to make that decision for themselves. I always think the best way to do it is find ways that it weaves into what you're already doing. And I'll give you an example. I teach a elective in atmospheric science, and I want them to do a podcast. And I asked them, my students, I say, well, have you ever written a podcast script before? And the answer was pretty much universally no.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, well, let's use ChatGPT to take some of the take some general information and ask it to write a podcast for you. And then that way they have an example of a podcast, but then we can also talk about, and this is what we did, the quality of the information that you get.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how does that information that you've asked it to analyze become part of the large language model? So there's a lot of things that you can do that are not just you're going to use ChatGPT, but little offshoots of lessons that you can definitely use. Again, my thing is always we want our students to be responsible users.
Yeah.
But in order for them to be responsible users, you need to help guide them in that. So again, if I was going to suggest to someone, start with ChatGPT, find a way that you can use it to support something that you're already doing, that the students can easily access. And then from there, build those offshoots about the quality of the information and how the information that you're adding or asking becomes part of the larger narrative and part of the larger conversation. When we did it in class, like one of the questions that came up was, because we write student comments, was do teachers use ChatGPT to write our comments? And my answer is, well, I don't, because I don't think that's right, because I should know you as a student. But again, the question is like, if I put your personal information up on ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to write a narrative about you, well, then I've introduced your personal learning information like to the rest of the world. And I think that's what they don't, that's sort of the big surprise to them.
Yeah.
It's also the big surprise to faculty when you tell them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But my recommendation, start small.
And I love that example because I think it's very attainable for someone who wants to introduce a new tool, who wants to spark a conversation, who wants to really start talking about these ethical use cases coming in from a practical standpoint, as opposed to just this like top-down yes, no use cases. It really connects back to something, that someone might be tackling in their classroom. So, Eric, we're chatting in the spring. Someone might listen to this over the summertime or even at the start of the upcoming school year. What's next for your program or for your work with students around this topic more generally?
So one thing we're looking at is thinking about, again, more about generative AI content creation. So there's a startup here in New York City that's working with filmmakers on making AI-generated films. And if I remembered the name of them, I would tell you, but I don't. But the idea is like thinking about, is there a way that we can partner with them in helping students really think about movie making and things like that, sort of as the next step. So they're just getting off the ground now. So that's sort of our next partnership. And then just really continuing to evolve the course and just see where things are going. And student feedback's really important. So I'll get feedback from the students. And then I'm also thinking about like next year, are there ways that I can have this year's students facilitate the course in parts next year as well? So always a lot of ideas.
No, and that's just wonderful to hear the student feedback loop coming into the equation, the community partnerships, right, of folks, especially within the region to lean into. And I'm going to link out for listeners all sorts of things. They can learn more about your work, learn more about some of the resources and tools that you shared. But for someone who's on the move as they listen to this episode and just wants to make kind of like a mental bookmark, if you will, where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about your work?
Probably the easiest place is on LinkedIn. So I think it's /eWalterScience. That's the best place to find me. And I'm always happy to talk to other educators about the work that I'm doing. I want to hear from other educators about the work that they're doing. And if you want to talk to my students about their work, they're always happy to talk about it.
Well, thank you, Eric, so much for your time today.
That was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It was so much fun chatting with Eric today, and we didn't talk about it in the recorded part of the conversation, but Eric and I were chatting a bit before we jumped into my interview questions for him. And the school that he works at is actually, walkable, just a handful of New York City blocks away from the school I taught at for a number of years in New York City too. So I always love those kind of funny connections or unexpected connections when chatting with folks about EdTech. So let's make this EdTech easy with a few key points from the episode. Start small when introducing AI to students. Use real-world projects to make learning meaningful. Let students choose tools to build creative confidence. Explore ethics through structured, thoughtful discussions. Remember, you can find the show notes and full list of resources from today's episode, including all the ways to connect with Eric Walters, by heading to easyedtechpodcast.com and finding today's episode. This episode is sponsored by my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction, published by ASCD and ISTE. It's full of quick tips educators can use, and Amazon almost always has it on sale. Just search for me, Monica Burns, on Amazon to see all of my books and quick reference guides. But please remember that there are 2 authors named Monica Burns on Amazon, and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to tell the difference between our books. Just head to Amazon, search Monica Burns, and you'll find my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction. Thank you for listening to this new episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. I love creating new episodes for you each week, but I could use a bit of help spreading the word about the podcast. Can you leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app? Spotify will let you tap on the stars, and Apple Podcasts will let you tap on the stars and leave a 1 or 2 sentence review. Thank you so much for taking this extra step. It helps other educators find episodes like this one when they're searching for EdTech tips.